Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fix and Flip DMV. My name is Cherie of Simply Funded. We are hard money lenders that lend specifically to real estate investors in the Metro DC area. So if you need funding for your deal, of course, please think about giving us a call or go to the website simplyfunded.com. I am here today with Mark Beckett. He is contractor. He is a real estate investor. He is the co-leader of a real estate investment association called Grid. And we are very happy to have you here today, Mark.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
How long have you been a real estate investor?
Let's say full time, just the only thing for a living being real estate investing started in 2008.
Okay. So you're an OG.
Kind of. I've seen some stuff. 2008 were interesting times. Those of us
Yes.
that were around at that point. I'd worked for builders and developers before that, doing project management and construction in home building and land development and entitlements and those kind of things. And really, the music stopped for all of that in
Hmm.
2008 when we had kind of our little real estate recession
Hmm.
globally. And
Little, yes.
it became necessary for anybody doing anything just about in construction or home building to find something else to do. So there was a lot of chaos in the market. There were foreclosures all over the place. It was, everyone said this is the world's worst time to be doing anything in real estate. By the way, that's a hint, that's a clue, right? If you're looking for success in anything, we follow the Buffett rule: be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy. There was panic and there were blood in the streets, and so it was a really interesting time to be doing other things in real estate. So I figured, I know how a house works. Let me see if maybe I want to do this house flipping thing, because I knew about it, had known about it for a while, and just had done my building for other people and thought maybe I'd try it for myself. So started going to some local meetup type, just local investor events, talking about how real estate works. Met this cool cat who is now our common friend, Rob Chevez, right? At what now is called Grid, used to be called something else. It was a small investor club, basically, that Rob started. And we just started talking about his experience in real estate investing. And so from that, we collaborated on some stuff, started doing a couple of deals, and it was kind of off to the races from there. And that's all I've done for a living, one way or another, since about 2008.
That's great. So, what we do during these sessions is like four things. We talk about how people can find deals, how they can fund them, how they can fix them, and then how they can either flip or do the burst strategy with them. So, let's start off with the first F, which is find. For the newbie rehabber that's out there, what are some ways that you have found deals and you would suggest that they find deals, especially in today's climate?
Sure. Well, we talk about this a lot in Grid Investor Network, right? It's kind of one of the pillars of things that we discuss. And I don't know that I want to say teach, because I don't feel like we're teachers or gurus. That activity is really just investors networking and talking about how the business works. But we believe the business works in one of three ways to, quote, find your deal, right? You can prospect, you can network, or you can market. And we consider prospecting to be, you go out into the world and say, will you sell me your house? That's houses that may be already up for sale, making offers on them. Some people call it driving for dollars, driving around looking for a house that's in rough shape, knock on the door, say, hey, I'd love to buy your house. Will you sell it? Highly active, time-intensive activity that you do to go out into the world and say, will you person sell me your house? And in our case, we're residential real estate investors. So that's prospecting in a nutshell. Networking is then just telling other people that, hey, I'm a real estate investor. I like to buy houses. And if you ever know of anybody that might want to sell one, please think of me. Let the people know what you do and hope that they'll bring you opportunities. And then marketing is trying to put money to work to get the phone to ring. So that's any kind of marketing campaign, be it written, postcard, letter, TV, radio, the driving for dollars thing, where you write down a bunch of addresses and then send those folks letters, absentee landlord mailers, whatever it is. Spend money and hope that someone hears your message of I would like to buy property or a house or whatever. Please call me or email me or whatever. Get the phone ring. Prospecting, networking, and marketing, right? And those are really the only three ways that there is that I'm aware of to find a deal. I keep using air quotes around that because we talk about finding deals, but while we do buy things that are on market, where we do what we call that prospecting activity of, all right, I'm going to take some time, I'm going to write an offer, I'm going to see if they take it. But we're not really looking for deals. There really isn't very much out there in the way of deals to be found. We buy houses from motivated sellers who have a problem that we can solve. So what we try to tell people is try not to think of it as I'm looking for a deal. What you're looking for is a situation, a problem, a motivation where you can have a solution to a problem. And by solving someone else's problem, it creates an opportunity for you to do something with real estate that hopefully makes you money, right? So that's what I encourage people to do, is just try not to think of it as I'm looking for a deal. We don't buy usually pretty properties. There's usually something going on with the property, or there's something going on with the seller or the owner of the property that has created a problem that needs to be solved. We solve the problem through some means, and it's not always just paying cash for a house. That's where creative financing comes from. But whatever the issue is, the problem is somehow involving the real estate, we can solve the problem. And by solving the problem, we get access to the real estate that we use to do our deal. So that's the philosophy around it, the prospecting, networking, and marketing. And then for me personally, the vast majority of our deals come from the networking activities. Don't do a lot of prospecting right now, as in just like going around and knocking on doors or sending out offers on listed property. It can work. It's a little difficult. Always a little difficult because there's always some amount of competition. Right now, there's a lot of competition. There's very little inventory, and it's very difficult to find on-market properties that make much sense. So we rely on our network, and that's why we have run for 14 years this investor network, and it's open to anyone. It works for more than just the people that run it. In fact, we think it might work better for some of the people who just come and attend and network and talk about real estate and find other wholesalers and investors and agents and people who come across deals, right? But that's where a lot of our deal flow comes from, is other people who have found the deal, who have found the motivated seller, who have helped solve the problem, and are now looking to either sell their rights, which is wholesaling, or partner on a deal, or just look for a way to kind of figure it out. They're not exactly sure how it works, but they know this person wants to sell this house for probably below market value. It probably has some opportunity in it to be fixed up and rented or sold. And then we help people kind of figure that out, and we get deals from that.
Great.
So I'd say that's where I'm getting most of my opportunities from now, is that networking activity.
So I was writing this down because I didn't want to forget. So with a newbie, do you suggest they put money into marketing, or do you suggest they go more of the prospecting or networking route?
Yeah. We think collectively, the folks at Grid and our partners who kind of run these activities tend to think that early on, one of your best returns on effort and investment is in the prospecting and networking activities. And it's because they're first low cost. Marketing costs money. You have to have a marketing budget. You have to be able to sustain that budget for as long as it takes to have it take effect and generate a lead or an opportunity. And it only works while you're deploying it. The moment you stop, marketing stops, the phone stops ringing. Whereas you have as much time as you have to go prospect, door knock, network, do other things to try to find an opportunity. So it's free from a dollar perspective. It's not free of your time, but however much time you have is what you can invest in the activity. Also, doing that activity, literally doing the hard work of knocking on the door and saying, hey, I'm a local real estate investor. I buy houses in this area. If you ever happen to know anyone that might want to sell a home, I would love to talk to them. That's not an automatic skill for most people. And the more you do it, the more you will sharpen your pitch for what it is that you're doing, the solutions you have. And of course, we typically aren't knocking on the pretty doors because those people don't need our help. But a house that needs some work, someone says, well, why would anybody want to buy this house? Actually, we buy houses that need work all the time. That's in fact where we're most able to be effective for people. We can buy properties that the regular market might not be looking for. Right? Your typical home buyer looking for a home that's move-in ready or at least close to it. We'll buy the other stuff that needs a little bit of work or has some hair on it or has some stuff to figure out as far as how it can get done and what else needs to get paid off or what time frame issue there might be. There's, like I said, there's usually something else going on. So getting into those conversations with people will make you better at understanding who you can help, how you can help them, how to phrase it, what like as I said, your pitch should be. So doing those prospecting activities and doing that networking and just having the conversations is really valuable in kind of sharpening your skill set for how to do it. Then once you've kind of figured out, all right, this is the message that works, people kind of get this. I've actually had somebody say, oh, you're maybe interested in that. Great. Now I know what people are responding to. I've figured out what problems I'm best at solving and what kind of people I might want to help. Now maybe I should think about spending some marketing dollars on trying to reach more of those people. And that's all marketing is taking a message and trying to spread it broadly to hopefully the people you're trying to reach. Do the inexpensive stuff, cheap from a dollar's perspective activity to work on your message, then take that message and apply marketing to it. So that's the long answer for if you're starting out. We really think do kind of the guerrilla-based marketing of knocking on doors, talking to everybody you know, get good at having the conversations around real estate, and then start marketing. Marketing usually comes after, just because you want to get good value out of that money.
Yeah, love that. So then let's talk about financing, funding these deals. A lot of newbies are, they get kind of scared. Like, what if I put a contract on something
All
and
right.
the money is not there? What am I going to do? How am I going to get the money? So talk to us a little bit about how you fund your deals.
Sure. So starting out, everybody starts at square one, just about, and has to answer those same questions and figure those things out. Some people have more or less capital when they start in the business, but figuring out how to fund your average, what we'll call it, renovation project on a property that needs to be fixed up to either be sold or rented requires some amount of capital. Depending on what part of the world you live in, it might require quite a lot, right? Most people think starting out, well, I probably need to find some kind of a partner type deal, maybe with someone who's either got money or has experience, preferably both. And maybe I've got a little bit of money or I've got a little bit of experience, or we both have a lot of hustle and determination, and we'll go figure the rest of it out. And that's good. I highly recommend that. Partner up. And that's another great advantage of a networking community, is finding other people that you can partner with that maybe have some experience or have money or have what you don't have, right? And kind of collaborate on things. A lot of people also fund earlier projects with money that they can get from friends and family. I'm going to get this from the rich uncle and he'll help fund my thing, and then I'll buy it, and then we'll figure out how to pay him back. And the thing that most people just automatically default to in most cases is somebody give me the money, I'm going to go out and try to find the deal, and we split it, right? It's 50-50 split. That can be okay. That can work out as a fair arrangement for both people. What we suggest is that as soon as you're able, start thinking about real returns on effort, real return on capital, and real return on risk. That really should determine who gets what, is who's risking what and who's investing what in both time and energy and money, right? And I think most people find that maybe after a couple of deals, maybe after a dozen deals, maybe on the first deal, they realize that the money's actually not that hard to come by. If you've found a good project, you've got a deal, right? A thing that pencils out that will make money if it'll make a profit if money is available to do it. Finding the money is really not that hard, right? There are plenty of places to get the money. Then it again becomes a matter of, all right, well, what's the best return on what money I have to bring? How much money can I get from some other source? And what will that mean to me in the way of how much hopefully I've got left over? And so that's where hard money and private lending and other loan scenarios come from, is you're hoping that maybe you can borrow money from someone that's not necessarily a partner or even a friend or family, where you don't have to give up half, right? You're paying perhaps less as a percentage of profits to borrow money from someone who's just in it to lend money on a good, safe deal, right? And so that's where hard money and private money lending really comes into play. As long as the deal makes sense, you get funded. If the deal makes sense to the lender and it's an adequate risk for the return, makes sense. It doesn't matter what your past track record was in any other business, or it doesn't matter if you've never done this particular thing before. If your deal makes sense, you'll be able to get funded. Credit kind of matters, but it's not the most important thing in the world, right? Just, do you have a good project? Do you have something that is likely to succeed, pay back your lender, and leave some profit for the investor? That's a deal that gets funded, and the rest of it's just figuring out the numbers. So that's kind of the progression I find, is that most people start with trying to find a partner or find a friend and family or find like some other person they know with money, and they say, all right, we're going to do this thing. You bring the money, I'll bring the deal and the work, and then we split it. And then eventually people discover, well, I don't necessarily need to give up half of my profit just to find the money person. There are people out there with money that they're happy to lend to let me do my project, right?
Yeah. And I do
So
want to say, if people don't have the money partner right away and you're still a newbie, so give Simply Funded a call, because we do have a program specifically for new rehabbers. Because there are hard money lenders that will not lend to inexperienced rehabbers, but we do have a program for the newbies. So definitely give us a try with that.
that's the other thing about funding, right? Is there are lots of different ways to maybe get a thing funded.
Mhm,
Talk to a few people, right?
mhm.
And see what else is out there. Everyone will approach it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
It pays to work on your personal network of people that you can contact when you're looking for anything, including funding for your deal.
Absolutely. So then let's move on to fixing, because you are in construction, and the number one issue that a rehabber has is underestimating the construction costs or the time it's going to take to actually complete the project. So talk to us a little bit about that. How should new people think about construction and make sure that they are calculating it properly?
Sure. Yeah. So when you're newer, you don't know what you don't know, right? So uh, we think education is key in everything. So you want to try to get as educated as you need to be able to take action. That's a double-edged sword. You can't be a permanent student of the business either. You will always learn the most by doing. So you'll get an immediate crash course education by just going out, getting your hands dirty, buying a house somewhere that might need some work and figuring it out. But there are ways to shortcut some of the process. Back to the network again. That's exactly what we've built, as a place where people can come and talk about it and figure out how things work. And we have a time of the year where we just talk about things like estimating renovations. And what I've done is, over the course of doing hundreds of these, come up with kind of a matrix of costs. And what I try to do is package the the act of renovation down to tasks that cost an amount per square foot, to where I can say, all right, based on the square footage area of this room, of this house, of this whatever, I can roughly estimate, based on knowing what I typically do for a property like this, I can rough estimate what a project might cost without spending hours to do line item estimates on every little thing in the house. But there's several ways to get that knowledge. You can find shortcuts that, like I've used, that kind of developed over time based on my experience and my history and the way I approach renovation. You can connect with contractors and tradespeople that do the work, and then say, all right, I'm looking at this project. Would you be willing to come and look at it with me and give me a proposal, give me an estimate for what it'll cost to do that? And that's a really valid thing to do also. Just be aware that it needs to be an even exchange of value. You don't want to contact a contractor to look at the 50 houses that you might be making an offer on, that you probably won't get any of them as actual deals if they're just on market deals, which, as we said, are really hard to do. But maybe make it worth their while to help educate you. I will pay you to come and give me a proposal on this, knowing this might not be an actual project for me, but I'll respect your time. I'll pay for your time if you educate me on what's it going to cost to replace this roof, what's it going to cost to refinish the floors, or gut renovate the kitchen, add another bathroom downstairs, whatever it is. Understand the project, start talking real numbers, and start getting proposals. Just don't expect to be able to call the same person 50 times for free and get their time to go look at your thing. They'll pretty quickly stop answering your phone call. So always be thinking about a fair exchange of value to get that information, to get that education, and find ways to, as quickly as possible, get enough of an understanding on what it might cost to do, so that you can put your budgets together, know where you want to be on a deal, know what kind of offer you want to make, and then start making your offers and hopefully landing that deal that will then open up all the other doors of all the other education you're going to get when you actually get a project going, which then comes back to that whole partnering thing again, right? Find somebody that maybe has done it before, that has more experience in the estimating and the renovating. If you've got a project, find somebody else that you can work with. We love working with other investors who have found the opportunity, need to figure out how it works. Let's come up with an arrangement that works, where if you're bringing the opportunity, we will show you how we would estimate it, how we would budget it, how we would run the pro formas for how the deal is going to work, how our funding works, on all of those things. So that's where partnering is a huge advantage. If you're starting out, just find somebody else where you're going to try to bring the opportunity. When you've got an opportunity, you partner with someone else to try to figure out the rest of it.
Yeah.
But
Does it make
budgeting part,
sense? Does it make sense for somebody to maybe get the property under contract at one amount with some sort of a clause in there that says that is subject to, the inspection by our construction people? And that way you're not losing a deal potentially or anything like that. You know, you're so that way when we contact you and say, hey, we have something that maybe you could partner on, like we actually have a contract in hand.
yeah, you're talking about kind of giving yourself some options and maybe even giving
Yes.
yourself an out.
And giving yourself an out, exactly. Having a
Yeah, of
clause in there
course.
where you can get out, but at least if I'm talking to you and you say, well, do you have a contract? It's like, yeah, I signed a contract for X number of dollars, but I have a clause in there that it can be adjusted based on, what you come back with.
Yeah, you absolutely want to have as much flexibility as the buyer as you possibly can, right?
Mhm.
And when it comes to talking to a lender is going to really prefer, and sometimes even require, that you have the property under contract before they'll take the time to dive into it and understand what it's worth and understand the risk and determine the cost of the money and all of those things. Same thing with your contractor. They would love to know that you've actually got this thing locked up, if possible, before they spend their time looking at it. But it will all depend. And all of that will depend on what you're able to negotiate with the seller.
Mhm.
Again, all comes full circle back to I'm looking for motivated sellers, because a motivated seller that has some kind of problem going on with the house, financially, something where, all right, I'm going to be bringing a solution here. I'm bringing something other than just, you've offered the house for sale, I'm making you an offer. You have a lot less flexibility in a competitive market when someone is offering a thing for sale. They are dictating some of the terms. We get to dictate some of the terms when we're providing some of those solutions. So some of those terms might be, I'm going to put the home under contract. I do need a little time to be able to come back and work through some of the fine details with some of my contractors on some of the costs. I'm going to set up some of the funding. I'm going to work on setting up closing. That'll take a few days, but we'll still be able to get this deal done when you said you needed it in the next couple of weeks, within the next month, whatever it is. But I do need a little bit of flexibility to be able to come back and dot a few I's, cross a few T's, and possibly even have an option to cancel based on a future inspection of the property, if you think that's something you can negotiate. And oftentimes you can with a motivated seller. If you're bringing a solution to the problem, fine. You need a couple of weeks to actually make sure that it's going to happen. Okay, but as long as, if you can solve my problem, I can live with that. And of course, for wholesaling, that's key, because that's your window to find your end buyer. If what you're doing is wholesaling, which is the act of selling your contract rights, right? You need that window of time to go find your buyer, assign, get it closed, and have them step in for you. So yeah, having those clauses for either, you can call it a kick out, a cancellation, an inspection, whatever it is, will be important if you can get them. It just depends on your confidence in the deal, your experience in the deal, the person that you're talking to, the motivation of that seller, and what they're willing to allow for in the way of flexibility in those terms. So
Yeah.
you do, though, to your point, best case scenario, before you talk to a lot of other people, try to get the thing under contract with the best terms you can, preferably with an out if you need it. And then you go to your lender and your contractors and your other people to make sure that you've actually got a solid deal before you move forward.
Right, right. So then the final F is flip. So talk to us a little bit about the resale process after we've done the renovations.
Sure. Well, we have two main exit strategies when we buy real estate. Either we're going to sell it or we're going to rent it in some form. And both of those have other kind of subcategories underneath them. But let's just talk about the two most common, most known about kind of end goals here, is either to just resell the property, hopefully for more than we've got in it, or rent it out long-term to a long-term tenant who hopefully moves in, signs a lease for at least a year at a time, pays us a certain amount every month, again, hopefully in excess of what it costs us to hold the property. And that's your long-term, what we call a buy and hold, right? For rehab, where you intend to sell it, you need to renovate for whatever the market is that you intend to sell into. So what is my price point going to be when I go to sell? What is the expected standard of finish and materials in the property to reach that standard in this neighborhood? What's the season that we're going to be selling in? Does seasonality have anything to do with it? What's the general market sentiment, interest rates, supply and demand? What's the supply in the market? You'll have to consider those things, because you need to know what the market might be like when you are selling in it, if you're a seller. Similar then for a long-term hold. Now you're going to be a landlord. All right, well, what's the tenant market like in the area? What's the likely rent going to be? What are the typical terms that tenants are getting in this area? What are the interest rates for a longer term loan if I'm going to borrow money and hold this property for a while? So you really should think about your exit strategy on the way in, right, and determine what type of exit this property needs. In higher cost of living areas, the way it typically works is, if the numbers make sense for a rental, for you to be able to put some amount of debt on a property and still have the tenant paying more than all of your debt, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and all your other hold costs are. If the deal makes sense for that, I'll bet it makes sense as a rehab too. You could probably sell that same house renovated for a decent chunk of money, because you probably bought it fairly cheap. to make the numbers work for rental in a high cost of living market. That is why it is much more difficult to find good cash flowing rental properties in high cost of living markets. Rehabbing to sell, a little bit easier, right? I have a better chance of finding the $500,000 house. I can put $100,000 in, be all in for like $650 with all of my costs, and sell for $750. That will make sense. Whereas doing all that same work, being into it for $650, now trying to rent it
It
at
is hard. Yeah. So I will
45, 5,000
admit,
a month is hard.
yeah, so we have a loan called the DSCR, Debt Service Coverage Ratio loan. And what we're discovering in this DMV market, unfortunately, is that when people are renting out, they buy the properties and then they're renting them out, rehab them, rent them out, and then they come to us for these DSCR loans can be anywhere from 5 to 30 years, but we have to have at least a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning that your principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and a couple of other fees that are included in there, um, that has to equal the rent. And unfortunately, in the last few that we've tried to work on with clients, they're not 1-to-1. So unfortunately, a lot of individuals have had to sell their property or figure out other ways that they're going to refinance those properties just because the rents haven't kept up in the area. So that's just something for people to think about, not to scare you, but just to make you aware that maybe when you're getting into a property, you really might want to talk with that lender also about, when I'm ready to refinance this thing, what do the numbers need to look like so I'm able to refinance successfully? And that way you can have your whole strategy in place before you close on the property. It's just a suggestion for people.
Yeah. Like we were saying, it really all comes down to knowing what your exit plan is when you go in, and understanding the different products that might be available, like that debt service coverage ratio loan, or if you still qualify for a traditional 30-year, government backed investment property loan, or are you getting private long-term funding, or are you going to use the home equity lines, or are you going to use a self-directed IRA? There are lots of different ways to make things work. Just know what is available to you, know what your options are, think about them on the way in, and try to make sure that everything's been kind of baked into whatever projections you've run to kind of understand how it would work. And for us, those private and hard money loans work really well for the acquisition of both rehab projects that are only going to be 6 months. We borrow the money, sell the house, pay it back, job done. Or you buy it, fix it up, rent it under that original loan. And then once you have a good, stable, possibly even rented property, then you can refinance into a different product, right? Because you can qualify for different loans based on where the deal is in its process, right? When it's an ugly, broken down, burned out house, it might not qualify for the same kind of loan that it will be when it's pretty, has a tenant in it, they've been in there for a couple of months, and now it's a good, stable rental, right?
Yes.
So knowing what your options are for that is really important. And it's, again, about having that Rolodex of people you can talk to talk through these scenarios and say, this is what I think this should be. What do you have that maybe works for that scenario?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for educating our audience. What's the best way for people to reach out to you? How do people get involved with Grid, etc.?
Yeah, that's the thing that I think we want the most, is more people to be a part of our Grid Investor Network. So gridinvestornetwork.com is one place that you can find a lot of information about that operation. Our monthly events that take place all across the country that are hosted by people like us that believe what we believe, that givers gain, and that you give information to your group and you love on your tribe and good things come from it. They host meetings all across the country that you can find both on that Grid Investor site, and a lot of them are on meetup.com, which a lot of people might be familiar with as just a platform where you can find other people doing all kinds of things, investing and hiking and dating and everything else, Ours is real estate, so find a Grid investor there at locations, again, all across the country where people like us get together once a month and talk about how all of these things work. And we also have a Facebook group, Grid Investor, the closed Facebook group. If you go there, you can join that. It's absolutely free. And you'll see people talking about deals and talking about money and talking about renovations and sending out referrals and finding partners and all kinds of cool stuff there. So we highly encourage people to check us out there.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Mark, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we look forward to, I'm part of Grid, usually attend the Reston chapter, but attend others as well. So I hope to see you out at a Grid networking event. If not, then definitely come to simplyfunded.com in order to get your lending needs taken care of. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay.